Usually. Hey, this is Vasyl from the Beat CPAs, and I haven't been doing this podcast for a while now. So today is actually a pretty cool theme because I call the firm the Beat CPAs, and a lot of people sometimes people call me. It's like, hey, I got your voicemail and it says something about dance. Do you own a dance studio too? So I have some pretty cool icebreakers about that. But we have Nicole Nelson with us today, and she comes from auditing background, a lot of auditing background, but she knows a lot about dance because she's been doing dancing professionally. That's why I was curious to I mean, first of all, like welcome you, and then get your take. If you could share with us your background as an auditor and dancing, how did you get into dancing? And then once you've been practicing auditing, if it like what parallels and metaphors and comparisons you could share between dancing and auditing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I got my start in auditing. I was in auditing for 20 years and worked for one of the big firms. But dance, I got started in a long time ago. I got started when I was 5 years old, and I actually
Wow.
started dance because I have inverted femur bones, and they told my mom that being in ballet was going to be the only thing that was going to help me to
Wow.
grow into my body.
Yeah.
And so it was a little interesting because I did it because I had this issue that I needed to deal with, but I ended up loving it and did it throughout my whole life. And when I was in college, took a ballroom class and fell in love with ballroom. So began to compete in ballroom for my young adult life. And then after competing, now I do a lot of teaching.
Yeah, it's interesting what you said about necessity-based dancing because effectively that's how we start businesses. Usually we identify a certain need in the society which is not being fulfilled or only partially fulfilled. And
Mhm.
we're like, well, I see a need, a demand for that. So I mean businesses are also like emerge out of the necessity-driven situations.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, a lot of people might start getting into business in order to generate wealth or pay the bills or just out of a need because they don't have other opportunities in the area. But similar to dance, they might find that they actually have a passion about a particular product or service, and it might drive them to really expand and grow that business in a lot of different ways.
Right. I remember when I started my career in 2013, I was talking with some auditors and they were like we were discussing comparisons between auditing and tax, and one guy goes, I don't see myself doing tax at all because it's like one rule and exception upon exception, then multiple exceptions. It was like I would much rather like do auditing because it's more straightforward. You follow some more, you don't have as many exceptions.
Hmm.
Like, would you like do you connect with that statement or do you have differing thoughts?
I think a part of it comes down to the level of experience and knowledge you have in each area. If I think from the surface, accounting standards, which lead to the auditing, is maybe a little more straightforward, high level. But
Yeah.
once you get into the more complex areas, there's definitely a lot of exceptions or rules or judgments that have to be made that can still get pretty complex. But it really depends on the complexity of the business and what kind of transactions the different companies get into.
Yeah, so you mentioned an interesting point because when we talk about like behavioral, like say PhD in behavioral accounting, a lot of the topics don't really pertain to tax. A lot of those topics pertain to judgments in the context
Mhm.
of auditing engagements. So, it's like interesting, like you talk like, I mean, in that case, it was auditing manager over there at the CPA firm. But then say you're talking at the PhD level, and then you're dealing with a different set of assumptions and considerations.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. As you get further into judgments and estimates, you're dealing a lot more with human behavior than you are with actual rules or numbers. And so, you have to understand what drives people, what their motivations are, and what their aim or their goal is in order to determine whether or not the things that they're using as inputs or the assumptions that they're making are reasonable.
Right. So I remember participating in a few auditing engagements. Some of them were on the tax side, where I was a part of the tax team auditing the tax provision. So like more from that angle, but I also had a couple, like I don't know, like two or three, when once like we were auditing like fashion company, and then a couple other ones. So I have some limited exposure to auditing and just doing field audits and things like that. And I remember like one of the challenges was that you come into the room, and then with that client, and then like there were like five of us or something like that. And then there is like a lot of like chit chatting going on, and then it becomes hard to focus, because like I was staff at that point, and the partner, and then I want to participate in these discussions that partner is having. He's like, look, just stay in your track. And it becomes difficult to focus in that kind of setting. So an interesting notion is like using dancing for flow, for getting into the flow, and
Mhm.
really, developing that level of engagement with the project, that no matter what's happening, all this chit-chatting outside you in the room, but it becomes a background noise, because you really get into the flow, and all you care is figuring out your specific problems in front of you.
Mhm.
So I'm curious about your take of using dance as a mechanism to get into the flow, and whether you feel like the ability to get in the flow as a result of dance was helpful in your auditing engagements, as far as focus and interaction with other audit members goes.
Sure, absolutely. Especially with partner dancing, competitive dancing, social dancing. Um, you really you're in an environment with a particular partner, and so you want to focus on that partner and what you're creating together. But at the same point, there's lots of other people on the dance floor, and so you need to be focused, but at the same time aware of what's going on around you, so that way you can still take all of that in. So that might be avoiding another couple on the floor or making a move in the room when you hit the corner and that kind of thing. And so um, there's a balance that has to be established between the focus you have on your very particular dance and the awareness that you have of the space around you. And that is the same thing when you're working in a environment like an audit environment where you've got different things happening around you. You need to focus on what you're working on, but at the same point you still want to be aware of what's going on, especially as a new hire or a new staff, because you want to peripherally be grabbing some of that information and knowledge that you just don't have yet. And maybe you don't have the experience to really truly participate, as the partner kind of indicated to you. But at the same point, you still want to be aware so that way you're taking it in and learning from the people around you.
Yeah, and that peripheral point, like I remember, so like we had this client, and like during the bathroom break, so like I'm just chit-chatting with this like CFO of the client. And I'm like, how's the day going? And he's like, oh, I hate it, like I shouldn't have like even gone in this profession in the first place. And he was like being like very negative about his professional outlook, that he's like so sick and tired of all of these things. So like, but I'm not sure if he was like thinking that I'm a part of the audit team, or he sounded like maybe he was just sharing in general, but
I
like
see.
peripherally I'm still like collecting all of this information. So like I wrote an email, so when I wrote like my audit findings, I included some peripheral information that I received. And
Mhm.
so like my manager is reading that, and I like, and the partner is like, why did you put it on behalf to account for that? So it's like sometimes being inexperienced, and you're like, I guess that will be valuable information too. But
Hmm.
Like partner, like ultimately, it's like partner makes the final call. So,
Right. Yeah, exactly.
it was just adding complications than helpfulness for the audit team.
Absolutely. And so I guess from your experience in
Yeah.
tax, like differing from audit, like how did you kind of start to see dance in tax?
Yeah, so like I see that, like when we talk about the tax code and the parameters of the law, so I see like a dance floor. So I mean you can experiment a lot. I mean, even within different genres, some genres experimentation is much more welcome than other ones. So likewise in tax, you can be creative from the standpoint that you can use a certain section that generally not used for the XYZ, and then say, well, I mean, the law doesn't prohibit it using like for software. So, even though, it's a part of fixed assets, but it's not technically written for software, doesn't mean that you couldn't use it because the law doesn't prohibit it either. So, you exercise the measure of creativity, but still, you have like certain rules. You got to have reasonable basis, a substantial authority. But it's like the dance floor with the perimeter, but like with a lot of room for experimentation.
Sure. That makes
And
a lot of sense.
yeah, and then I think it's like with the strategy formation, it's like like you have like to conceptualize like what you're trying to accomplish with that particular dance. It's like I think about that group in London, and their goal is to use dance in order to show complicated topics in physics in simple way. So when they show some of those concepts, then the dance crew really have to figure out like what kind of physical phenomenon are we portraying here and
Mhm.
create a specific strategy. So I think the choreography, it's like one of the investment firms call themselves choreo from the word choreography, because to showcase that emphasis on the strategic approach of the choreography process. So I think, a lot of overlap there between choreography and tech strategy.
Absolutely. I mean, really, that can apply to both, and the accounting world is the same thing because we do have a lot of regulations and things, but there's a lot of areas to still have movement and freedom, and you
Yeah.
got to play within the parameters that they give you, but you can certainly express what you're trying to communicate to your financial stakeholders via the choices that you're making within those rules.
Yeah, when you said moment, it makes me think about the word currency coming from the word current or like moving water. So we do these exchanges of goods and services and exchange currency. And I think, I mean, the word currency itself indicates moment, and life in general is about moment and alteration of on the cellular, on the tissue level. I mean, just constantly everything is constantly changing. And so when we so I think like one of the things that frustrates me just hearing, see, being in the tax world, I hear this Benjamin Franklin's quote all the times, like nothing is certain but death and taxes.
Sure.
And you see, like when anytime I hear and you're saying like personality is some people say personality is fixed and certain, or taxes are certain. It's like using these maxims. I mean, it's stifling. It's like, so then the societal consequences are people like, oh, this is the only personality, it must not be changing. So, like I cannot really change anything, and having this kind of fixed mindset and outlook on things. And the same with taxes. It's like people receive the tax notice, and most of them just think the government must be right. So I
Mhm,
just
of
go ahead
course.
and pay it
Mhm.
because, they just brainwashed nothing is certain, death and taxes. So if you hear it long enough, you start believing it. So the motto that I use is everything is negotiable even taxes. You change the way you mow, you will feel better. You change certain tax variables, you change your taxes. Just like
Mhm.
show me the fluidity of taxes, like going against that Ben Franklin's notion that, oh, it's certain, it must be certain, there is nothing I can do about it.
Yeah, no, there's some truth to that for sure. You can always look at how you can change up your situation, change up the partnership, change up the song, if you will, like in a
Right.
dance, and put yourself in a different situation where you might be able to make some adjustments and have a different outcome just based on the change in inputs.
Yeah, and when you said moment, it also makes me think about the color accounting framework since we
Mhm.
met through color accounting,
Yeah,
and I like their framework. It's language, it's let's see, it's language, it's structure,
and
and
mechanics.
and its moment, like a moment in debits and credits and changing account with moment. So I think, and most of the time, I mean, people don't think about accounting as a language. So I heard so often people come to me as soon as they hear I'm an accountant, and they're like, "You must be really good with numbers, right?" I mean, so that's the first thing that they think, and I actually say, well, act in accounting is like twin profession for law, and concepts and language are actually primary. Numbers are simply applying that language and concepts practically.
Mhm.
So it's like, okay, we normally don't think about accounting as language, but then structure, yeah, of course, it's a kind of no-brainer. It's like everybody can agree there is structure in accounting. I mean, we not dis
Mhm.
nothing is in dispute there. But then moment, I think me connecting with the topic of dance because I very much wanted to go against the notion of static and rigid nature of accounting, but
Mhm.
highlight that it's like dance, it's very much fluid, it's changing all the time.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, it really gets down to communication. In dance, it requires two people to have a basic knowledge of the dance in order to communicate to each other. Anyone can really watch it and appreciate the athleticism or the artistry, but if you know the steps, and the effort it takes to execute them, you can truly appreciate the work that's gone into it and really be able to critique what this dancer has done. Um, Similarly with accounting and finance literacy, it really allows an individual to better appreciate the effort needed to summarize hundreds or even thousands of transactions to create these financial statements. And then, that understanding allows you to unlock the secrets of the metrics and the analytics that are driving the decision making and generating the roadmap for that particular company's vision. And so, by having that understanding, you can really read the financial statements, get the communication that they're trying to tell you, similar to Dan's.
Yeah, and then when we say like in order to dance, there generally must be music. I mean, granted, you could dance without music, but generally you do have music. And I think that notion that you talk about creating order out of chaos, these classic music pieces, when at first it's like super somber and heavy, but then eventually as that music piece progresses, it becomes much lighter, and then these disordered, chaotic elements become much more organized and structured, and all of a sudden it's like, wow, like what a beautiful combination going from such like heaviness and somber character, but then really creating something so beautiful out of that.
Absolutely. There really can be order and beauty in chaos. It's just a matter of taking those things and categorizing them, which is a big element of what we talk about in the color accounting
Right.
program as well, is knowing how to like take all of these different things that are out there and what are the different ways you can categorize and sort them in order for them to make sense. And dance and music just can do that as well by interpreting what the artist is saying within the piece and organizing the steps in order to take that and communicate what is what
Do
is in
you
the
do you
music.
do any music too?
I sing.
Nice.
Yes. Yeah. Do a lot of karaoke.
Yeah, yeah, usually my level of singing is so like one friend said you sing like like a dying dog, and one person said, "Look, I sing too, but in the car."
A lot of different places.
So when I was at university, I really wanted to. I needed to do like the art elective, so I wanted to do something fun. So I elected men's choir, and I mean, and the professor was very nice and accommodating. So I came for audition, and I did like back to the USSR by Beatles,
Oh yeah,
and and the and I did like very mediocre job, and he was like, "You sure you really want to sing in men's choir?" I'm like, "Yeah, I would." He's like, "Okay, okay, 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 let's do that." But sometimes in the rehearsal, he was like, "Vasyl, don't sing, just hum, just listen." And sometimes he would just open your mouth as if you were saying it was like I was like really butchering it, but still it was like a great experience getting out of the comfort zone and really trying something new.
absolutely.
And with dance, like with dance, my issue with dance was like I tend to get like self-conscious because I have tendency towards perfectionism, and when I'm uncertain on myself, I'm just getting self-conscious and like, oh, people think it was like I'm just being like really awkward. And so what would you say to people who may want to venture out in dancing, but they held by these notions like, oh, I will look dumb, or what people will think of me? How would you recommend like taking some of these initial steps towards trying like something new like dancing?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there's something that can be said about having really great technique and
Mm.
being able to execute something with perfection. However, typically in your mind, when you're so worried about trying to get something perfect, you're actually not being fully expressive. You're not actually being fully
Right,
open. And oftentimes, those people who are trying so hard to get it right actually end up looking really ridiculous. Sometimes you look very stiff, you look very just disconnected, disjointed because there's no actual um, just natural organic movement happening. And so really, as with many, many, many things, it's really more about having the confidence to just be who you are. And once you can release that and express yourself fully, then movement becomes more natural. And even though maybe technically, if you were to take a video in a microscope and look at every single step, maybe some of the steps aren't as perfect, but
right,
overall, the whole piece, the whole thing that you've put together is is better, of higher quality
right,
because it's natural and it just flows. And you'll find that when you are yourself, you're going to get a lot more compliments about the expression that you just made
right.
versus if you're trying to be perfect about it.
Yeah, yeah, it's great. And like when we talk about AI and that AI can displace a lot of things accounting can do, especially math wise. So AI can do math and forecasts pretty easily. But then like the part it cannot displace is these gray areas that going back to judgments and intuitive areas. So would you recommend like if somebody like wants to future proof his skills, would you recommend like doing some dancing or perhaps stand-up comedy in order to develop that spectrum of human like skills that cannot be displaced by AI?
Absolutely. There's something to be said about continuing to expand your own mind and expand your experiences. Um, it's interesting. I actually recently was listening to someone comment on a interview they had just done with someone, and while they were doing the interview, this person had a very tough time completing thoughts. And when asked, like, you look really great on paper. You seem really nice, but just communicating, I just feel like it's a little stunted. And so the interviewee responded and said, I'm just having a really hard time because I've used nothing but Chat GPT for the last, so long on all my assignments, anything I'm putting together that I'm used to starting to type and Chat
Yeah.
GPT kind of finishing my thought for me and not having to complete my full thought. And so really making sure that you're engaging yourself in experiences fully, being 100% present and formulating your own thoughts about something. You know, as with anything, AI is merely a tool. And so you
Right.
want to still be able to formulate your own thoughts, know what you want to say ahead of time. So that way, then, yes, the tool might be able to help you write it a little more professionally or use a little more um, colorful language than
Yeah.
you might have come up with on your own for marketing purposes, but you still need to make sure that it's your message, and that when you are away from that computer and you're just having a conversation one-on-one with somebody else, that you can still engage fully about what it was that you wrote using the AI, or the math that you did with the AI or whatever it might be. And so I truly believe that engaging in the arts, engaging in new experiences, that can help in continuing to generate the neurons that need to fire in your brain to
Yeah.
stay present in this world of AI and technology.
Yeah, and a fellow member from Color Accounting, I think he's based in Ohio, like Peter Margaritis. So he calls himself accidental accountant because I mean he totally felt like he stumbled into it. But what
Mhm.
he does, he does a lot of stand up comedy, and he does these like accounting talks. He makes them like super funny and engaging. So like I think like I really like that approach that you use something unstructured like comedy into seemingly very structured field such as accounting.
Yeah, there's a lot you can take away from other fields and then bring it into accounting. You know, what an accountant does really encompasses a lot of different skill sets. It's not just the math, which is what a lot of people think about, but really we have to engage in conversations with clients. We need to be out there selling business. We need to be thoughtful and creative when problem solving or generating an estimate or whatever it might be. And so all of those different things really can borrow from other experiences you have in other fields.
And it's funny that AI was able to pass the bar exam but failed the CPA exam because of the simulations and those more tricky
Yeah,
parts of the exam.
yeah, yeah. You do have to be able to respond to a situation in live time, versus, we don't always have the opportunity to go out and surf the entire world's network and find the
Right.
exact information that we need in order to come up with an answer that's needed in a decision making point. So,
Yeah, I remember that page from auditing book at and it was talking how broad and diverse auditing is, and it was like probably three-quarters of the page, and it's was talking about interrelated fields to auditing. So like from like psychology and all the way through international relationships, if you work with foreign companies, for example. And it was like it's astounding. It's like because like so many fields impinge on it and all of these interrelated components that go into auditing.
yeah, absolutely. A lot of different areas.
Yeah, and then think you mentioned something about like partnership, like when you dance in tandem with somebody. So it brought two more thoughts. The one is about partnership allocations in taxation, and the second one about getting to know another human being. And so on the first one, partnership allocations, so the partnerships are one of the most complex areas in taxation. And one judge said it's the most complex area of taxation. And the reason is because of tiered partnerships and interrelationships between these groups of entities, but especially because special allocations, because you can have multiple allocations within the partnership, that this partner gets this and this partner gets that, and you can have tens of different allocations like that. So that presents a challenge on the tax return, because it's like, okay, 50-50 is like 50-50 capital, 50-50 profit, and 50-50 losses. I mean, it's super easy. But when you work with these multi-tiered partnerships with various special allocations, it becomes much more tricky. And I thought Like one of my favorite songs is Finnish polka, and these three ladies like dance it like in a very rapid fashion, and it's so well coordinated. And I'm like, well, if it's some like slow piece, of course it requires skill set too, but especially when it's fast paced like that, it's hard to keep up. So I
Mhm.
think it's a kind of like equivalent of the special allocations in partnerships when it gets that complex, but you can still be in sync, but because you put the legwork into weekly technical training and you stay on top of that, and then you can really fine tune it to a science that you're like, oh yeah, we can put that together because you have like so much familiarity with
Mhm.
the text code.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would definitely equate that to a dance partnership, especially in a faster dance. There's give and take that happens. So maybe sometimes, I'm pulling and you're pushing or you're pulling and I'm pushing in order to get around a turn or to make your way across the floor. And, similarly in partnerships, even a simple partnership, everything's not necessarily 50-50. Like you do have to go through and understand that sometimes one person's contributing or giving a little bit more
Yeah.
and other times the other person is and ultimately eventually it's you're hoping it's because you're offsetting each other and you're complementing each other and that you generate that balance that makes for either a successful partnership on the dance floor or a successful partnership in the business itself.
Yeah, and then the second thought is on getting to know another human being, and so like fundamentally we get to know each other through food, music, and dancing. And dancing is the most personal because it can get a bit awkward, because you got to get into that interpersonal dynamic. And I think, when we talk about the taboo subjects in the society, people generally say, well, you generally don't discuss money, politics, and religion. So those three. But then, people would. I mean, it's not that infrequent for people to discuss politics and discuss religion, but money becomes that like most uh, awkward and intimate subject matter that people shy away from. The same way as people would much rather meet over a meal and some like live music rather than to go out there on the dance floor, because it's a totally different level. So I think it was another interesting component about the trust, about CPAs being the brokers of trust. It's like before somebody, I mean, how is somebody going to share these money issues, or maybe just say like, hey, just say I mismanage it in XYZ way to somebody that they don't have trust with? And
Mhm.
that notion of like certified public accountant, meaning that like we are stewards of that public trust with the society, but also with that as trust broker with the client to make them feel comfortable that we do have their best interest in mind. So
Mhm.
that notion of trust, and building that trust, that like initially the dance can be very awkward until that trust is acquired, and that
Mhm.
partnership seems much more natural.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, no matter what level of relationship you're at, whether it be just meeting for the first time at a social dance on the dance floor, or whether you've generated a long-term partnership with a partner, it really requires vulnerability and intimacy. Same when you're presenting your financial information to a new service provider. Like you said, at first it can be a little unnerving. Um, Someone with the proper experience can really generate that level of trust immediately. Well, if I go on the dance floor with somebody who I haven't danced with before, but they hold their frame in a way that just makes me feel very comfortable and and taken care of,
Yeah,
I know that the dance is going to go okay.
right.
Versus if that initial getting into frame is saggy or
Yeah,
too stiff or whatever, I know that the stance is going to be a little bit of a grind. We'll
Right.
get through it, but it's going to be a little bit
Yeah.
of a grind. And so
Right.
same thing when you're and this is for, any service professional can really take this away from this, is that when you're meeting with someone, it's important to establish that frame, even in the
Yeah.
context of what service you're providing. It's because if they get that initial feeling of comfort, they're going to be able to open up and be more creative or be more sharing with their information,
Right.
versus if there's some hesitation there because it feels too stiff or it feels too loose,
Yeah.
then they may hold back and they may not be as open to, ordering more services or providing as much information until it takes longer to generate that relationship.
Yeah, and it's so much about like not about like verbalizing and saying, because people say, well, we are not mind readers, but at the same time we we intuitively hope that another person like reads the situation. So it's so much more about feeling than verbalizing, because I mean, it's so easy to say, well, we are not mind readers, and now they use this maxim, so to speak. I mean, technically, yeah, but on the other hand, I mean, a society is built on really these social cues and reading the situation, and like really learning to feel the situation rather than wait for somebody to actively verbalize what may be off. So I think so. Do you feel like your dancing experience helps you get in touch with your clients better because you can feel better what's going on in the dynamic? Because I mean, the client is not saying that XYZ is off, but you can intuit much better because of your dancing experience.
Yeah, I mean, I would say a little bit, just the fact that dancing is so nonverbal. You're communicating with someone, whether it be an audience member and you're connecting with them through facial expressions and their reaction and that kind of thing, or whether it be um, when you're actually with with a partner and you're communicating in that way. Again, it's all through the feel of your body, and there's really not a lot of discussion that's happening. And so that can naturally give you an ability to be in other situations and to be able to read body language and facial cues in a way that's a little different from how a regular person might otherwise see them.
Right, it's like Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson. So like Sherlock
Mhm.
Holmes like could like give like a reading of the person and just seeing the person for the first time, but give pretty accurate reading of the person. See,
Mhm.
like Watson's strength wasn't in that. He could observe other things and give some like additional angles to think about, but not necessarily reading people.
Mhm.
But like I think like I think that people who do more of these spontaneous things such as dancing or stand-up comedy, I think there is better proclivity towards Sherlock Holmes like intuition.
Sure.
But at the same time, I must like it's recognizing not everybody can be on that level of intuitive thinking. That's why some people are just more like Watson, more like analytical and just regular logic structure. So based on your experience in working in different audit teams, what could you say if that applied or didn't apply to the dynamics you've seen on the audit teams you worked with?
Yeah, I mean, both skills are necessary. You need to have sort of that kind of more common analytical skill set in order to just really get through a lot of the work. You need to be
Yeah.
able to uh, take in information that's being provided and execute on the task at hand.
Just don't
Um,
ask me to do tick marks. No.
right. But at the same time, when you get to some of these more complex areas, there's a lot of human behavior that goes into it. And that's where having more of that Sherlock Holmes intuition can really help and have you be a little more skeptical, have you ask more questions, and to observe not only the verbal response that's being given, but also the response that comes with the nonverbal communication and to determine whether or not you have something that's perhaps not quite matching up.
Yeah, so it seems that lately, there has been a spike in the audit reports not uncovering the things they were supposed to uncover. And then, like there were some recent articles analyzing there are more audits where, it's like the quality is not the great that the society would expect. So for a successful audit, to derive like really solid opinion on the financial statements for this particular company, like would you say, like, do you think it would be helpful to have like a certain ratio of, say, like more intuitive people to more analytical people? Like, could you like give some benchmark rough approximations of how you see that?
Yeah, I think to balance a team, you probably need more kind of analytical get work done just from
Yeah.
a amount of work that's necessary. But you do need to make sure that you do have people on the team that do have more of that intuitive aspect. But I would say that there is a common thing that has to happen for both types, and that is that both have to be curious. And so I think
Right.
that's where a lot of people run into the challenge is that, yeah, you're just kind of doing your thing and checking your box, whether it be one or the other, but you still have to be curious as to what is it that this company is intending to do? What is it that this transaction is intending to do? And really not just, you know, going kind of blind and just trying to get through things, but to take a few extra moments to really think through what it is that you're doing, because that's really where a lot of this stuff might get missed. Is that surface level, it seems fine, but until you dig into it and really stop and pause and say, wait a second, like, does that really truly make sense with everything else that's going on, with everything else I know about this company? That's where those questions can get answered.
Yeah, like I had a conversation with the financial analyst the other day, and he did a computation, so he computed percentages, and one was like negative like 219%, and I was like, look, I mean, like, shouldn't it have told you that perhaps there is an error in the balance sheet? But going back to your point, if you just do routine computation, okay, my task is to compute the percentages, but you're not processing if something is showing you there must be an error here because you're just so focused on computing the percentages or not thinking like for this specific company, it's not starting from the business model and acquiring understanding of the client, but just jumping into the execution. So it's like the lack of the strategy component.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just really limiting yourself to a single task versus being aware of, hey, maybe directionally I haven't been told to do this specifically,
Mm.
but by just being aware and being curious, I might become present to something that I should share with somebody else.
Well, I really enjoyed discussing this topic with you. Thank you for your insights and can, are there any parting thoughts you would like to share or like challenge the audience?
Yeah, I think we are in a new year. And I think it's important for people to challenge themselves in a lot of different ways, whether that be taking on a dance class or other art that really can engage your creative side and your other athletic abilities, artistic abilities. And at the same time, challenge yourself in your own accounting and financial literacy. People sometimes think that they can leave that up to the accountants, but it doesn't matter what role you play. Having a role in that conversation will help you in whatever role you're in the company that you work for, and it can also help in your own personal finances and well. And so, if you're interested in learning about any of those topics, there are several professionals out there like us who
Right.
can help with either one of those things.
Yeah, I think That's great, and I have a lady in my BNI club who teaches dancing, and I kept on telling myself gonna take a class, at least a few classes. I'll just bring my wife so that like we have common activity, but I kept on procrastinating, so I would say that the challenge is accepted. I will definitely make it this year, just at least like a few classes, see if I like it. Maybe I like it and I continue taking classes, but at least trying it, see how it goes.
Absolutely. You never know. You got to try it out and find out if you like it.
Well, thank you, thank you for this conversation, and all the best to you in your career as you inspire people to challenge themselves and stay curious. Right.
Thank you.
Take
Same
care,
to you.
Nicole.